Are you waiting for me, Daniel?
I'm waiting for everybody. It takes a.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Anaïk to give me the
thumbs up,
the
signal.
Okay. So welcome everybody to this webinar, which is it the last in our webinar series for the semester? Not the last.
We have Anne-Marie McDonald next week.
That's right. So for the penultimate installment of our webinar series, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Jean-Christophe Bellil-Pipon, who is a bioethicist working at the intersection between new technologies, health regulation, and stakeholder engagement. He is doing a very rapid postdoctoral fellowship at McGill and at the Centre de Recherche en Éthique. Very rapid because he will be starting a job at Simon Fraser University in the Faculty of Health Sciences just in a month from, I guess, a month from today in 2021. So we congratulate him for that. He's also a visiting researcher of the Petrie Flom Center at the Harvard Law School and the Public Health School at Université de Montréal. His talk today will be entitled Partnering to Identify and Tackle Current and Prospective Ethical, Legal, and Social Implications of AI-Driven Interventions into Health Policies and Regulation. So he will be speaking for about 40 minutes, and we will then have a little bit of time for Q&A. So please feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat, and I will be collecting them and collating them to pass them on to our speaker. So without any further ado, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Daniel. Thank you very much, all. Let me share my screen. Okay. Oops. Not sure what happened here. There we go. Okay. So yeah, today I will be speaking about citizen engagement in artificial intelligence ethics. So the goal is to try to find ways to enable peoples to provide input for policy making. So it has become a truism now that the ethics of AI is necessary and must help guide technological development. In recent years, an impressive number of statements of principle, normative guidelines, and ethical commitment have emerged from academia, from industry, government, and civil society, while providing a basis for discussion and exchanges on the appropriate regulation of this new technology, especially in health. It's not always clear how these ethical guidelines were developed and who has been involved in their enunciation. So by AI ethics, I will focus on an emerging field of practical AI ethics, on work that aims to develop framework and guidelines to foster the ethical use of AI in society. On the most prominent visible guidance in AI ethics, whose development is mostly structured by organizations, but also to collective intelligence through citizens' moral intuition and inclusive moral decision-making. So for now, let's start with the most visible one. So the most visible one are usually developed by tech companies aiming to develop their own ethical guidelines or code of conduct. Also by industry standards setting organizations that are situating industry-wide general standards. Government bodies and regulators are also, in addition to their policies and regulation, are setting out ethical principles for AI. You have NGOs and civil society who aspire to make AI works for humanity and not the other way around. And researcher, which is often in transdisciplinary way, aim to substantiate AI ethics with a combination of technical, legal, sociological, political, and philosophical insights. However, the leading paper being now published and widely cited, which at first aim mostly at inventorying AI ethics principle, are now having a more critical vision towards them, especially regarding their relevance and applicability. It is now even paving the way for a new subfield of AI ethics, which focus on the identification and analysis of the content of these ethical benchmarks. So the leading papers, we have several that are published monthly now. We also have reports that are being published, like the one from Berkman Klein Center. For the little anecdote, their offices were right below mine in that really friendly building at Harvard Law School. Sadly, due to COVID, it forced me to flee Cambridge and come back to Montreal. However, it turned out that Montreal wasn't that COVID-free after all. Anyway, back on track. So new inventories, such as the one from Algorithm Watch, and AI Ethics Lab are also giving visibility and prominence to these statement of principles. But what's about stakeholder engagement in those documents? That's something that it isn't widely put forward. Most documents are putting people first in their principle, but to which extent people are actually involved in their development, it's not clear. So the research question I aim at tackling was about the state of stakeholder engagement in the most prominent AI ethics initiative. So we conducted an environment scan of AI ethics guidance and principle statement. I've conducted that study with Professor Vincent Couture at Laval University with the help of Marie-Christine Roy and Erika Monteferrante at the School of Public Health at Université de Montréal. And our paper should be sent to publication in the coming weeks. So we sample 35 documents that were present in the Berkman Klein Center report, as well as 12 other documents that were inventoried by AI Ethics Lab. Berkman Klein stopped to their inventory in October-November 2019. So we had to use another inventory to complement that. And this study is funded by SSHRC. So without any surprises, most documents are coming from North America and then from Europe. But a surprising number of documents are coming from China, Japan, and India. And you can see that none are coming from Africa. And it's an acknowledged limitation of most ethical guidance inventory, especially from Berkman Klein Center. And so we have 3 that are coming from Canada, for example, the Montreal Declaration and the Toronto Declaration, in addition to one that the G7 issued 2-3 years ago. So what about stakeholder engagement in those documents? So if we analyze all those AI ethics guidance or AI ethics principle, it's striking to see that only 38% of them are engaging a stakeholder. And all the other one either not disclosing stakeholder engagement or it's really explicit that it was done internally. So only a third of them really indicate stakeholder engagement. So that's something really interesting to see. And if my first question was, what's about stakeholder engagement in AI ethics, and especially the citizen part of it, we have our answer. Only 38% of those documents are engaging stakeholders. So thank you very much for your attention. We can now move to the Q&A. Oh wait, so Daniel, don't go to the Q&A right now. I might have something else to add. So fair enough, only a third engage stakeholder in developing their ethical guidance. But who are they? What can we learn from that? what can we do better? So who's doing stakeholder engagement? We in the sample document that we had, most of them are coming from government, multi-stakeholder initiative, which can be either academics with government initiatives, or it can be multi-stakeholder with civil society, or it can be a mix of any of those all, and intergovernmental organization as well. Who's largely not doing stakeholder engagement? Well, the private sector. So that's really an interesting result at first. So who's engaged in all those documents? So on the left, you can see in proportion, we can see that the industry representative are leading in the number of engaged stakeholder in proportion, followed by academic. On the right, you can see that industry representative are always engaged whenever stakeholder engagement is done, followed by academics at 94%. Okay, yeah, I have little animation, sorry. And citizen are the least engaged in proportion, and as well in percentage of initiative that are engaging stakeholders. So maybe one can think that things are evolving, and with time, stakeholder engagement will increase. But there's no trend in terms of increased multi-stakeholder engagement in more recent document. 2019 was close to 2016. 50% of all initiatives were either engaging or not engaging stakeholder. And we see that 2020, sorry, is possibly one of the worst year in stakeholder engagement. Can it be related to COVID? Maybe, but most often the consultation are online with calls, with public calls for engagement. And this year, with tracing application and other uses of AI to tackle the pandemic, wouldn't there be more opportunity to engage stakeholder on really interesting issues as well that directly concern citizen and patient? So there's no trend of increased multi-stakeholder initiative. So what's about, or what do stakeholders seems to yield in those initiatives? So on the left, you can see the level of detail per stakeholder engagement, either yes or no. With 4 levels, so we define 4 levels of ethical detail that those documents are yielding. Either most of them are only having like a list of principles. So in a one-pager, for example, you have a list of 12 ethical principles that should guide for mostly companies' activities. And then level 2, you will have more detailed list of principles with a little justification. Level 3 will have much more detail and especially justified ethical principle. And level 4, what we decided to be like the highest level of ethical guidance, is when the documents are detailed and they are embedding a normal framework within their guidance. On the other side, you have the level of practicality. So level 1, there's no practical recommendation whatsoever. So like a list of principles, if you don't give ways to understand how can stakeholder make use of those principles and apply them or even balance them, because there will always be a tension between like say privacy, transparency, etc., etc. And the level 4 is those initiatives that are yielding practice-based recommendations that are really specific and that can capacitate actors or stakeholders to use them in their daily practices, either the tech industry, the regulators, or the users. So we can see that most documents that are not making use of stakeholder engagement have lower level of details and lower level of practicality. So to answer the question, what do stakeholders seems to yield? It's being much more comprehensive in terms of ethical guidance, but also much more practical. So the more comprehensive, the more engaging, the more practical, the more engaging as well. So why do I care so much, you may want to ask? Why do we need direct input? It hasn't been the case for most social issue or even for most technology to have such direct input in regulating or evaluating or even considering those innovations. Haven't we established really good proxies that can act in a way to consider broader public perspective? Yeah, well, yeah. But in addition to our results that are indicating poor stakeholder and citizen engagement, there are a few reasons for considering that it can be important to focus on multi-stakeholder and citizen inputs. First, some scholars begin to point out that AI ethics declaration are embedding a rather paternalistic perspective or approach. And that's really interesting because in the field of bioethics, it took us maybe 50 years to be able to go beyond paternalism, and we are much more engaging now stakeholder, either with empirical bioethics or other participatory approach, and it's the same in health. Second reason is that even if we have citizen engagement, we will continue to need proxies to develop, arbitrate, and implement AI ethics guidelines in practice and in policy making. And those proxies may be either policymakers themselves, academics, or any other organization that can play an intermediary role in between the AI ethics and the practice-based policymaking or decision-making. And not to mention the widely shared and accepted narrative that AI will have a large impact on many aspects of our life, which explain the very high level of public interest. And that's a narrative, but the correlation seems to be really strong. We probably never saw so much engagement either from citizens or from many stakeholders about a technology than AI. We saw that maybe 20 years ago with genetics, for example. But I would argue that for AI, this trend is way broader. And a fourth reason that is probably idiosyncratic of my part, is that I advocated elsewhere for an engaging turn in research or specifically in bioethics. And having an engaging turn in bioethics means that we shouldn't rely only on good scholarship or even on empirical research. But to put citizens, stakeholders, people at the center of our moral lens. So fair enough. What I've done to fix that would be a really good question. So first I've worked on raising awareness by engaging citizens through art. So with an amazing and diverse team, we paired bioethicists with contemporary artists with a mission to work on specific ethical issues of AI in health. Specifically, the artist and the bioethicist explored the nuances and sparked public interest on emotionally charged, identity-related dimension, which were related to LCs, so ethical, legal, and social implication of artificial intelligence. And that has been done through an art and science exhibition for public engagement. This led to an exhibition that took place a year ago at the Centre d'Exposition de l'Université de Montréal, which lasted for a whole semester, so about 4 months. So we had duos in Boston, in Montreal, Paris, as well as London and Germany and Switzerland. Our duos work together from a complementary perspective on a multitude of issues, either doctor-patient relationship in the era of AI, or the implication of mobile health application and devices, or even the ecological impacts of servers that are used to power AI algorithms, something that usually is not considered in AI ethics in general, which is more focused on individual than ecological consideration. So I won't go through all the artwork. You can find them on the project's website, which is AIship.org. But on the top left, you can see Clément visual installation, and which is catchphrase: AI solves problem, but doesn't have any. In this artwork, Clément didn't use any kind of punctuation, which is leaving the visitor to decide whether it's a claim or it's a question. On the bottom right of your screen, you can see Grigory's Chatonsky installation, which uses AI algorithm to attempt at generating emotion from the part of AI bots. With Laurence de Villers at Paris-Sorbonne, they reflected on the genuineness of robots in motion and their capacity to care. So all our duos, throughout their collaboration, sought to provide material that would be thought-provoking for citizens and make reflect on ethical issue that may soon affect the healthcare system, policymaker, and in a not so distant future, citizens themselves. So potentially, okay, so that project was a one-off. At best, it raised awareness for about 2,000 people and really engaged maybe a handful of citizens. Were citizens really able to voice their perspective? Probably not enough. However, in that project, one of the most interesting contributions, in my opinion, is to having provided a physical space for citizens to reflect on the ethical issues of AI in health. It's the realization that from our scan that I showed you earlier of AI ethics guidance document, that such space for citizens seems to be clearly lacking. So informing allows to raise awareness. Now I'm working on the second step of the gradation of citizen participation, which is consultation. That should allow citizens to hear and to be heard as well. So I will present you a second project. So in the early 2020, before everything shut down and it was actually possible to travel, Vincent Couture, who I presented you earlier, came to Cambridge. So over a long weekend, we committed ourselves to develop a citizen engagement device. So I guess you can say that's for academic, it's leisure time, but over the course of 1 weekend, we wrote a grant application for a call from Quebec Population Health Research Network, especially from the Ethics and Health branch and the technology of information and health branches. So we sought in our pitch to develop a citizen-oriented device that was capable of eliciting citizen moral insights. We sought also to allow direct engagement of citizens on those topics. We sought to make sure that it was co-developed with a diversity of stakeholders, including citizen, expert, and policymakers. And that device had to be also able, and that's more from a scholarly or academic perspective, to contribute to the field of bioethics with providing a new participatory device, either for bioethics or for health policy ethics. So we decided to use the metaphor of the compass to help citizens better identify their moral insight and inclination, and help them navigate themselves the field of AI ethics in health. So to better understand our intention, maybe an interesting parallel that can be made is the vote compass. If you're not from Canada, you may not be familiar with that tool. Which close to a provincial and federal election, this tool ought to inform citizens and ultimately help them vote. The tool is sponsored by CBC Radio-Canada and was developed by Vox Populi. And the tool seeks to help citizens identify their affinity with political parties, and as well as with social, cultural, economic issues. And it's really citizen-oriented because at the end, it allows people to be able to see where they are fitting in the political landscape and who's closer to their interest. Either the Green Party, Bloc Québécois, Liberal Party, NDP, or the Conservative. Just to let you know, those aren't my result. It's the one that are generic on the Vote Compass website. Okay, but at the same time as we sent our application a year ago, a book with the same title has been published from Daniel Steele. And Vincent and I we reflected and we were wondering whether Daniel Steele's Moral Compass will be more popular than ours. Spoiler, Daniel Steele's book is apparently already a bestseller, so most probably her Moral Compass will be much more known than ours. So, joke aside, the intent of our Moral Compass is to put citizens at the center of the deliberation. Our intent is to develop a device that will be able to raise citizen awareness on the ethical issues involved in the use of AI in health, to allow citizens to take position on these issues, and to collect and analyze citizen position. And that can be either analyzed for research, for academic endeavor, but we seek also to be able to make sure that it can inform health policy making as well. But moreover, our Moral Compass seeks to solve a problem and provide citizens with a moral space. Somewhat similar to Margaret Urban Walker, our goal is to design a space for bioethics, for reflection, for citizenship, an agora for citizens, but also for public decision maker, a moral space for information, education, and co-development, and co-learning, and co-decision making as well. So our methodology, we decided to tweak a little bit the Delphi method, and to tweak it in a way to be able to to develop a prototype of our moral compass. So the prototype will have to be co-constructed with a panel of about 15 experts, which will involve citizen, as well as decision maker, population health expert, AI expert, and ethics expert at the same time. And over about 6 to 8 months with them, using 5 rounds, we will be co-constructing that device. And at the end, there will be an optional webinar to return result to participant and to debrief the whole process. So the moral compass module to be developed are the ethical dimension, which represent the moral benchmark we will use to map citizen attitude and position. This will take the form of continuum of moral attitude and perspective. If we go back to the vote compass, for example, you add a graph, X and Y graph, where the position of citizen could be compared to those of political parties. The goal is to do something close to that, which means that the position of the participant or the citizen will be put on that on specific ethical graph, and it will be possible to compare the position of a group of participants to other groups. Then we will create a questionnaire of about 30 to 40 questions to take position on a series of general population health AI issues, which will represent the core of the characterization of citizen perspective. For example, it could be about privacy. What do you value most, innovation or making sure that your information are private? And all those questions will be using Likert scale. So, for example, from 1 to 7, what is your agreement on a specific set of statements? And then we will create vignettes that will present citizen, that will allow citizens to react and position themselves on scenarios depicting ethical dilemmas raised by the use of AI in populational health. For example, it can be as specific as asking what are the basis of the social acceptability of using X and Y specific tech, which would be really helpful for health technology assessment, for example. Or it can be a little bit broader and trying to elicit some kind of threshold of social acceptability on more generalistic scenarios or case study. Then we will create a weighted grid for the questionnaire and the vignette that will be able to transform the answers of the citizen within our set of ethical dimension. So it's about trying to put continuums within our graphs using formulas for that. And at the end, we will have a graphical visualization of the ethical position that will allow citizen user to see in the form of graphs, figures, and weights their moral attitudes towards populational health and to compare them to other respondents. And this will be also collected, like I said, for research endeavor, but also to inform decision making. So that's the moral compass, which, like all those steps, just started. We just started the recruitment of our expert panel and of our citizen as well, and we should be able to have a first working prototype by summer 2021. Okay, so that's this consultation part. But what's about the next step? Partnership. So a way of enabling citizens to negotiate and engage in trade-off with traditional power holders. So in the gradation of citizen participationship, this allow a little bit more control and bargaining powers to citizens. So we in addition to the moral compass, we are also partnering with to inform HTA with ethical, legal, and social implication. We develop a partnership with INES, l'Institut National d'Excellence en Santé et Services Sociaux, which is Quebec HTA agency. We together with our research group, we are seeking to create a moral space where citizen, experts, policymakers can meet, exchange, and address together AI ethics concern. So we've developed that partnership in a project that, along with their methodology and ethics department, should allow to help us try to better establish Quebec or Canadian benchmark for assessing the AI application that begins to be introduced in the Canadian health and social service system. So in terms of health technology assessment, there are important needs. And in those needs, the HTA agencies must address the challenge that are posed by the massive influx of AI-based health technology. Therefore, there is a great need to assess the AI-specific consideration in HTA. AI is a challenging new technology for policymakers due to its implementation that is done in a fairly short time frame, because there's not yet much evidence of their impact and effectiveness, because AI is continuously learning as well, and required to be trained on a vast amount of data. And all those considerations are really important, and the citizen insights are key here. So really, I will go really quickly on that project. It will be in 3 phases. So where we at, where we want to go, and how to implement this. It will take the form of, or it will address, the needs to appraise the integration of ethical consideration into health technology assessment, evaluative, consultative, and deliberative processes, especially at INES, but in the broader sense, to inform current HTA practices, to establish an action plan to adjust HTA practices, but more so to be able to create that moral space where policymakers, citizen, experts, and industry can come together to co-address those problems. So I guess that if we are feeding that trend, 2019, 2020, 2021, to an AI, it will forecast by 2024, citizens will be in control of AI ethics. So joke aside, I think here the key take-home message, it's that it's our role to make sure that we are providing moral space for better engagement. I showed you 4 different projects, 1 that assess stakeholder engagement, and 3 that are trying to attempt in different and cascading way, if you want, stakeholder engagement. But it's our collective responsibility of defining what should be done in terms of the ethics of artificial intelligence. I have a role to play, you all have a role to play, and that's why together we can create those spaces. So I would like to take the remaining time for some shameless promotion. Like Daniel said at the beginning of the webinar, I will be starting next January, so in a month, a new position as faculty member of the Simon Fraser University. And I will be seeking students and trainees to set up my new lab. I'm using that webinar to poach students from McGill and to move to SFU. I would like to say that I really like the motto or the of SFU, engaging the world. I think it's really close to what I want to do. So feel free to contact me if you intend on pursuing a master, PhD, or postdoc on topics lying at the border of bioethics, new technology, citizen engagement, and policy making. And you can contact me either through my email that will be available for the next month, either through Twitter, and altogether we can put bioethics to work and make sure that citizen has a better place in defining AI ethics. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. So we have a number of questions that have been posted in the chat already. We have about 17, 18 minutes to get through them. If you have other questions, please don't hesitate to post them. So I'm going to proceed in the following manner. It's obviously, posing questions in the chat is obviously a challenge. One tries to be concise in asking the question, but sometimes there might be some subtleties or nuance that get lost. So I will read out the questions as they've been posed, and if the feeling is that I'm not getting enough of what you wanted to ask by just reading the questions, please ask Anaïk perhaps to unmute you so that you can intervene directly. So unless I'm mistaken, the first question is from Renee Sieber, who has a SSHRC-funded research project called AI for the Rest of Us, a citizen engagement in artificial citizen engagement in artificial intelligence project, which obviously seems to have links with your project, Jean-Christophe. And so the question is, what if citizens do not want to be defined as stakeholders? And so Renee posted a link to an article which concerns pupils and students who were victims of the A-level mess in the UK, a very, very long sort of thing to get into, essentially where algorithms get involved in the sort of ranking of students, and in so doing kind of carry with them all kinds of biases that end up reinforcing pre-existing lines of advantage and disadvantage. So there's a longish article here. Renee, I wonder whether you, if hopefully you're there, might want to come in to say a couple of words as to how these particular students sort of refuse to be viewed as stakeholders.
Great, it worked. Okay. Jean-Christophe did a really good job of expanding on the problems of multi-stakeholder participation, because citizens are placed at the same level as all these other participants. What the students did was they protested, and they did take control of the situation and cause the government to back down on the use of the algorithms. I don't know if you need more, but of course the problem in AI ethics is that so much of citizen participation is relegated to the concept of stakeholders. So what do you do to expand that to meaningful participation? And I'm glad that you showed the Sherry Arnstein ladder of citizen participation, because her hierarchical ladder suggests that empowerment only comes about when citizens take control.
A really great point. Thank you very much for raising that. Yeah, I didn't cite the source, but I adapted the scale from her. And it's interesting to see that, like you just said, like the three first steps that I'm tackling are ranked in her work as tokenism. So it's only when the last two, when we are we allow citizens to take control, that meaningful negotiation happens, and that's where the control it really is. So it's really interesting to see whether, or to question whether citizens are stakeholders like all the other ones. It's also difficult also to distinguish an expert from a citizen, because we are all citizens at the same time. So when are we able to voice a concern that is more broad or related to our citizenship, or when we are using expertise? And that's something that probably we are tackling, but by the side, it's for now we are trying to use mostly like build it and they will come. So we are trying to build a space, and that's why we are always in a prototyping mode, which means we will see how it will goes, and if we are facing some kind of contest of the part of citizen stakeholder, or it will inform our view, but our partnership with government agencies that are also putting at the same level citizen, or putting citizen as stakeholder like all the other ones. So thank you very much for raising that question.
Thank you. So we have a question from Michael De Silva, who posed it and then reformulated it as a result of something that you said, Jean-Christophe. So rather than trying to sort of recreate the chain of thought, perhaps I'll ask Michael to ask his question as well, if he could be unmuted.
Yeah, hi. So that was very interesting. And I was glad to hear you talk about the HTA process and the importance of engagement through the health technology assessment process. I think that's important. But I still have a wonder or a worry. And so maybe I will go back to my initial question, which is this. To what extent are you assuming that these processes are best dealt with through ethical guidelines? I guess my worry here is that if we're actually going to regulate the use of AI in healthcare in a way that's going to address many of our ethical concerns, we're actually going to need to do law reform work. And it strikes me that if that's the case, then where we need to get citizen engagement is in the law reform process. And I'm wondering, so I love that you're talking about it in the health technology assessment process, but I wonder how we can promote citizen involvement in that, and if maybe that's where we should be focusing.
Interesting. By no means I try to limit stakeholder engagement, or especially citizen engagement in the moral space, for example. I think that citizen engagement should happen in the legal context, or also directly with policymaker. But I would say that the moral space that we are trying to develop may be a little bit more philosophical or meta ethics oriented, but at the same time, I'm sure that those insights will help to orient every legal development and HTA assessment development as well. So for me, I'm not saying that. For me, it's an untapped resource, quote unquote. Citizens, and we shouldn't try to value one endeavor instead of the other one. I think we are lacking citizen engagement, so it can happen in the moral sphere as well as law and HTA, and that's why we are trying to do all those three at the same time with different devices.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jean-Christophe. We have a question from Ameya Benegal, so I will extend the same sort of thought to Ameya. I'll read the question as posed, and perhaps if you want to elaborate or expand on it, Ameya, we can unmute you. I think you've just been unmuted. So how would you, so the question for Jean-Christophe, how would you define member of population or decision makers? Are we talking single community leaders, a mayor, a police chief, etc.? So that's what I have on the screen. Would you like to expand on that at all, or is there enough there for you to?
Yeah, I mean, just to expand on it, first off, really great talk. This is definitely interesting, given how popular AI is today. So really, when we talk about like quote unquote like an expert member of the population, like when we talk about like stakeholders and all, like how do we know that this stakeholder is really representative of the population? Is this person when we invite this said person to a panel, like are they really the most representative person, and how do you try to account for that? Do you try to get different stakeholders like in different reviews? How would something like that work?
Very great question. And I think I will not be able to provide a definitive answer on the problem of representation for sure. At the same time, what I can say is that yes, we are trying to seek diversity and inclusion here. So in terms of decision maker, we are trying to figure to involve provincial decision maker, federal decision maker, as well as more community based or local decision maker. So to have at least maybe not a representation, but at least a voice at different level of government or decision making processes. On the other side, for citizen, we are launching a broad recruitment through social media with really minimal criteria. We are not seeking anybody with an expertise or an involvement in health or in AI or in ethics in general. I would fancy to have florists, truck drivers, and people doing catering, for example, rather than having the usual suspects. I don't know, retired academics, for example, that have ample times to reflect with us, but which are not really our target population. And you will see that the sample is quite small. We only have 15 panelists for the prototype, but that's because the project can only span for 1 year. And like I said, it's a prototype. So over the course of the 2 years that will follow, we will grow that panel to make sure that the code development is done with a way broader perspective, and then we will be able to address a little bit more your concern in terms of representation, for example.
Thank you to both. We have a question from Yael Peled, so I'm going to read it out, and Yael, if you feel that you want to elaborate, please feel free to grab the mic. I think you've been unmuted. So the question is, how able is the methodology to accommodate and handle a multicultural and multilingual citizenry? For example, since the process involves a deliberative component, how will the project ensure that the deliberation is inclusive, especially of often neglected populations, for example, deaf communities and indigenous peoples? Given how language dependent the project is on the elicitation and articulation of relatively refined moral concepts and positions, could it help to ensure a more linguistically equitable AI development? Yael, do you want to add anything, or?
So on that, it was a very interesting conversation. Sorry, it was a very interesting discussion. Sorry, because I don't know a lot about AI. But the thing is that the AI work that I have read, I think there's always a missing component of what's the underlying theory of language, what the underlying theory of communication. There are a lot of assumptions how AI is sometimes going to transcend us beyond these pesky boundaries, but it sometimes seems to me like there's a lot of hope of building the upper floors of a building when the foundations aren't kind of solid enough. I mean, there's a lot here about engagement and deliberation, but how does that work in a citizenry when it's impossible to take people being able to sufficiently communicate with each other for granted? And there's the problem that if this doesn't work, there's the danger that the AI that is being developed is only kind of perpetrates the kind of semantic exclusion of everyone else other than the people who are already very powerful?
Really amazing question. Again, I'm not sure that I will be able to address it in full. What I can say first is that in the prototype, we are limiting that to really a small sandbox, if you want. It will only be in French first and applied to the Quebec Canadian setting. That's only to make sure that we are able to build the gear, to build the oil, to make sure that our deliberative machine can work. At the same time, everything that you're saying is really important, because of course in deliberation it's even in deliberation, even if you have like an open and inclusive way, or you're thinking that you have an open and inclusive way to do it, being able to have the marginalized and the voiceless having a way and to be able to take part in such an endeavor is really difficult. So that's something that we are aiming to be able to address in the second year of the prototype. So thank you very much for raising that. The other thing that I would like to say as well is that we are, I can state that we all have unconscious bias, but I hope that my conscious bias is that we are, as a team, agnostic to the value of AI. We are not pro-AI, we are not against AI, so we are trying to frame it as much as possible in a language that is neutral, if it's objective, if it's possible. And then the goal of the panel, for example, is also to assess whether our language may be framing a particular attitude towards technology or towards regulation. So that's a concern we are really conscious of, and we are trying to tackle our unconscious bias, but still, yeah, really, thank you for raising that. We'll make sure to, it's good to keep that concern alive in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're technically almost at time, so I'll just read out the two last questions in the chat, and perhaps if Jacques-Christophe, you could say like a sentence to both, I think we'll then have to close. So a question from Samira Rahimi. AI is quite a broad area, as so is healthcare. How will you make sure that the AI ethic guidelines for health will consider these different aspects? Do you think a broad guideline will be able to cover all of these aspects? And we have a question from, we now have, I'll just read the other question. How confident are you that, from Matthew McCoy, how confident are you that citizen involvement in the development of AI guidelines truly makes a difference? Your results show that projects which engage citizens were more likely to offer well-justified and practicable recommendations, but the relationship between engagement and better recommendation need not be a causal one. So can you say maybe a word to both?
Yeah, sure. First of all, for the first one from Samira, thank you very much. Yes, it might lead to having a broad understanding of AI and of health. That will be the part of the questionnaire, for example, in the moral compass. At the same time, we are trying to be case specific, to be technology specific or context specific in the vignettes. And that's where we will be able to pinpoint better ethical guidance, which will should answer, or at least answer your concern. From Matthew, thank you very much for raising that. It's a really good things to say that yes, citizen engagement should not be put forward because it's working, but because we should do so. So all causal findings, I think, are mostly there to convince those that are more difficult to convince, and that don't think at first that citizen should have a way in such deliberation. But at the same time, yes, of course, we need to do citizen engagement for citizenship stake, or yeah. So thank you for raising that, but be sure that we are not just working on that causal link that is justifying our whole endeavor.
Well, thank you very much, Jean-Christophe, for that fascinating talk and your generous answers to the questions. Thank you to all the participants today. Just a reminder that AIEthics posted in the chat that we will have a last webinar on the 15th of December. Anne-Marie Adams, who's the chair of the Department of Social Studies of Medicine, will be giving a talk tantalizingly called Home Sick, which is perhaps something that we're all feeling 9 months into the pandemic. So please join us for that. There's a registration that's been posted in the chat, and it'll be on the IHSP website as well. So have a good afternoon, everybody, and see you at an upcoming event, IHSP event. Bye-bye.
Bye all.